All right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello again. This is Foghorn with another installment of Flight School Academics. For this, the 26th of January, 2949 or 2019 if you are stuck in the past. This presentation is part of an ongoing series of academics for the members of the Aurora Republic, a premier role-playing organization in Star Citizen. If you are new to the Aurora Republic or visiting for the first time, let me start by saying welcome. We are glad to have you with us and would love to hear from you if you are interested in hearing more from us. We are a lawful good organization focused on role-play exploration, social interaction, and are currently active in recruiting on Spectrum and Discord. Before we get started, first I'd like to say welcome to our two newest members, Delwan and Lithris. Lithris coming to us from Greek SA as an associate member. So welcome, glad to have you here. And a couple of quick announcements before we get started. Tomorrow is the big day. Tomorrow is Daymar Rally. So Fights On, I believe, is going to be, I think 11 o'clock Pacific is race start. So 11 o'clock Pacific, which I believe is 2 p.m. Eastern, and something like 1900 UTC. I did that off the top of my head, so you may want to check those numbers to make sure that I'm not sphincter talking. Anyway, in addition, we've got two teams competing. We've got Team Xenos competing in the bikes. So we expect them to be done in about an hour and a half. And then we have Team Event Horizon. That will be competing in the buggies, and that'll probably be like a 5-hour race. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be awesome and brutal. Brutal and awesome. In all ways, shape, and form. Okay. Other quick announcements. The recruiting drive still going on. We have some giveaways for whoever manages to get the most number of new recruits and get them through citizenship. In other words, get them rid of their immigrant tag as soon as possible. All before the next full org meeting, which also happens to be on Saturday, March 23rd at 16:30 Pacific. So be there or be square. Rules of engagement for tonight. We are streaming on Twitch, and I think we've got all of our technical difficulties sorted out. There's an 8-second delay from when I say something before it comes out over Twitch. I will be monitoring the Twitch chat. If you have to post a question there, or I am also in Discord, so you can also just come up off of voice or off of mute, and just ask the question there live if you happen to be in Discord with us down here in the academics room. Also, if you are in both, I would suggest muting Twitch so that you're not hearing my voice twice. But you're a big boy and girl, or girl, so feel free to do it your way. Tonight, we're actually going to do something that we've done before. I'm going to go back with as many new folks as we've got, and I've had a few requests for this. So I'm going to go back and do something that we've actually done 8 months ago, to the day, by the way, 8 months ago, 26th of May of last year. We talked about formation flying, so I'm going to go through the formation primer again. Hopefully it'll be faster and funnier because we have done all of this before. But it's always good information, and it's something that everybody needs to practice if we want to be a professional aviator. So we're going to go through it again. So it's a Redux. I'm going to talk to you about real-world formations very briefly, and then I'm going to show how those would actually translate over into Star Citizen. A lot of them won't translate over, and so I'll show you kind of where we would substitute or just delete outright. All of this stuff is going to have some big caveats that are going to go through the entire academic tonight. And that is, number one, the biggest limitation is the fact that we're flying, looking through a tiny little window into the Star Citizen universe called a computer monitor. And that is going to affect our ability. That's going to be the biggest thing that affects our ability to fly formations with each other. It's because formations are primarily visual. That's not always exactly the case, and I'll talk to those as those points show up. But that's the biggest thing that's going to affect most of this. And most of those real-world formations that you see here in the overview, probably at least half of them are just deleted out because of that right there. You can't, even with track IR, you can't turn your head far enough to be able to check your formation with flight mates with some of these. The second thing is that the sensors, I hate to say radar with when we're talking about these spacecraft, is because radar isn't even really referred to in that way anymore in modern fighters, because it's not just radars anymore. They've got electro-optical, electromagnetic. They've got all kinds of other interesting and cosmic and exotic sensors on them now. So it's really just more spoken about sensors in general. And I don't see why 930 years into the future it would be any different, or why it would go backwards and just talk, oh, radar. I mean, sound like we're playing Spaceballs. I like to drink coffee when I watch radar. Anyway, so the sensors that are, as they are displayed in the spaceships right now, are also don't have enough fidelity for us to be able to do sensor only station keeping with each other either. So that's going to be the other big Achilles heel, why a lot of these are going to go away, and only the ones that basically put your flight mate somewhere in your computer screen so that you can see it to be doable. Our legend down there, I want you to pay close to this, because you're going to see this all night long. We're going to be talking about 2 and 4 ship formations, and those are depicted when you're chalking them up on a whiteboard as a single line, like you see on the left side there, with number 1, 2, 3, and 4, 1 and 2 being blue, 3 and 4 being green, and 2s and 4s being the wingmen having the hash, and then divided by element. 1 and 2 is the first element of a 4 ship, 3 and 4 is the second element of a 4 ship. Anybody outside the formation, not that we're really going to be talking bogies and hostiles tonight, but just so you know that convention actually continues on. When you're talking about bogies are drawn in black, hostiles are drawn in red. And then when you get to the big, thicker arrows that you see on the right, those are formations. Those are arrows meaning an entire formation. So one of those big, thick arrows is worth 4 of those little thin arrows on the left, is the way to think about it. Okay, we're going to talk basically 3 broad categories of formations: the administrative, or I like to call them airshow formations, because that's about the only place that you really use them. Not necessarily at an actual official air show, but whenever you come up initial over top of the airbase, that's basically considered an air show to a fighter pilot. Combat formations, things we actually use in combat, and then the large force employment is how do we do big groups of formations like those thick arrows on the right. What kind of presentations would you see there when you're flying around in a gorilla? And I know you guys know what that means because you've been studying your brevity code, or else I will beat you about the head, neck, shoulder region. Anyway, so let's get started and let's get moving faster. Administrative formations, aka the air show shit. First one is fingertip. This is what you see most often at air shows, and it's actually does have several different uses in tactical flying. You can do this as a 2 ship, a 3 ship, or a 4 ship. It's very close, 3-foot wingtip spacing from each other. So you're basically flying with that other guy's wingtip right in your lap. You line up on the guy's wing line, and if you're going to do it as a 4 ship fingertip, 3 and 4 on the opposite side of 2 from whoever's leading. In Star Citizen, you can actually fly a fingertip, but you would have to slide that line back to more about 45 degrees of aspect, so that you can keep your flight lead over on the side of your computer monitor and see him, because this is a visual formation that you are flying with the other person, and you're keeping station in that position visually by watching the nuance of the body language of their spacecraft. You know, how when you see it turn or twist or roll a little bit, then you're moving to compensate so that you can stay in that position. The next one is route. This one is a slightly looser formation than fingertip is. When you're flying in fingertip, you're not doing anything except for flying in formation with lead. You are so close that you are literally not doing anything. You don't dare take your hands off of the stick and the throttle, assuming I'm going to talk as if you're flying HOTAS, but it's very similar if you're flying HODS for hands-on dual stick. You are not doing anything except for freaking just keeping station while you're doing that. You're not even really looking down into your sensors. That's why you only do it when you're not in combat. That's why it's coming up initial, so that you guys will look good, so you can pitch out and land and do it in a very efficient manner. Route might be where you'd have to do some sort of administrative thing like fuel checks, change some switches in the cockpit for something or other. So you kick the wingmen out to route, so they've got anywhere from fingertip spacing, but they also got all the way out to 500 feet in real life. And they don't have to necessarily be up right at line abreast 90 degrees. They can actually slide back to the 45 line. It's kind of a pie wedge out there, of kind of a zone that they can just float around in as wherever they need to be, and get some fuel checks, get some, what if it's anything that requires flipping of switches, then you're going to kick them out to route. You don't try to make them flip switches. You don't make your wingmen flip switches, their flight leads, while they're in fingertip, other than the switches that are built into the stick and throttle. When I say flipping switches, I mean things that are not on the stick and throttle, things that are down on the dash. You actually can use route, again, similar to fingertip. We got to slide it back so that you can keep your flight mate on your screen. So the wingman can keep the flight lead on the side of their screen. So you're going to slide that back to something more like a 45 to a 60 degree cone. And I'd open that out to about 50 meters to 500 meters. So that's actually a pretty fat space for them to be able to go heads down for a minute and take care of something and come up and not be completely out of position or have run into the flight lead. So remember, the wingman's primary job is flight deconfliction for within the formation. In other words, don't hit flight lead. Don't hit your flight lead. The flight lead is the one who's responsible for tactical employment. Okay. There we go. Close trail. This has basically no business in Star Citizen, other than just because I can, and it actually really doesn't have a whole lot of use in real life, with the exception of it is a skill builder for if you're in an aircraft that refuels. So you're basically one ship length spacing behind your dead six and just below the lead aircraft's engine exhaust. So are we ever going to use this in Star Citizen? I doubt it. I don't think, first off, I don't think whenever they put refueling in, I don't think it's going to mandate that you be moving. I think the fact that we're flying around in space means the Starfarer can probably just stop, and you can just pull up and use them like a gas pump. So there you go. Echelon. Echelon's the same thing as fingertip, except for everybody's on the same side of the airplane as the flight lead. So it's still fingertip spacing, so 3 foot. It's right down the wing line. Put everybody on the same side instead of it actually looking like a set of fingers. So same caveat for fingertip works for Echelon. It all still works. Just got to slide everybody back so that each successive aircraft has all of the other spacecraft has all the other spacecraft in the side of their monitor. You're actually going to see this formation here at the end of this presentation, because I actually have a video of Proteus, Chandran, and I back in good old 2.6.3, way back when Earth cooled and dirt was new. And we actually fly a little bit of this over top of Olisar, just to basically because I was showing them how to do it. And so it was a lot of fun. And I filmed it way back when I was figuring out how OBS worked. Okay, next one, faster and funnier. Let's get into combat formations. Okay, like I said, about half of these are just going to be deleted, but I'm going to explain them. I'm going to explain even those just so you know, just so you have that basic familiarity. The first one's a lead trail. So that would typically be a tactical distance of 6,000, 9,000, so a mile to a mile and a half. These are in nautical miles, not statuette miles, by the way. So 6,000 feet to a nautical mile. So mile to a mile and a half in trail with an altitude stack between them. You're behind your flight lead, so absolutely you could use this in Star Citizen. Of course, everything's being measured in meters, so I would just knock that down to 200 to 500 meters based on the visibility capabilities of Star Citizen right now. By the way, a mile and a half, 9,000 feet is a visual formation amongst fighter jets, because you can see each other pretty darn well at that range, actually. You can actually, typical human eye can pick up a fighter, definitely very, very high percent of the time inside of 5 miles. And on a good day, you can actually, a lot of times you'll pick up visual on guys all the way out to about 10 miles with the naked eye. Just a little factoid for you. Fighting wing. This one is actually probably would be my close go-to formation of choice, and I'll talk about that at the end too. How I would do things as a flight lead. In the real world, it's sort of considered a maneuvering formation. You're in a 30 to 70 degree cone, a 30 to 70 degree aspect that isn't just horizontal. It actually is a cone that goes all the way around the flight lead's airplane. in 3 dimensions, kind of like what you see on the right, where I kind of made that cone with the donut hole there. It basically means anywhere except for dead 6. Just don't be flying right up the flight lead smoke trail. But you can have this entire maneuvering cone, and you don't have to tell him where you're going. You can just maneuver anywhere in there, wherever you need to maintain distance and all that sort of stuff. So 500 to 500 feet out to half a mile, which is perfectly usable in Star Citizen. Again, I just changed it to probably something like 20 meters out to 100 meters. You're going to hear 200 to 500 meters a lot in these coming up formations, because that seems to be a pretty good range from what we've tested so far. But Fighting Wing is actually supposed to be a little bit closer. And oh, by the way, it's also intended to be more of an offensive formation. In this, that close, you guys are able to sort of concentrate firepower on a target, but you're less defensive in that formation. You don't have as good of coverage on each other. All right, boop. There we go. All right, so Fighting Wing. Next one's line abreast. This is actually the standard 4th generation fighter formation. 6,000 to 9,000 feet line abreast to 90 degrees aspect to slightly slung aft at 70 degrees with an altitude stack. That's the standard going into combat for a 2-ship. Totally unusable in that configuration. So I would substitute a wedge formation, 200 to 500 meters, and 45 to 60 degrees back, so that you got your flight lead over on the side of your computer monitor, and you can see, what when he moves, so you can move with him. Wedge, which I just mentioned, in real life is 4,000 to 6,000 foot range in that 30 to 60 cone. So totally usable in Star Citizen. Just move it down to about 200 meters to 500 meters so that you can actually be close enough to see the other spacecraft. Fluid 4, also known as Fighting 4, depending on who you're talking to. Some people say one, some people say the other. It's actually the same thing. So it's actually a 4-ship now with 2 elements. The 2 flight leads, the flight lead for the entire formation being the blue arrow, and the deputy flight lead or element lead is over at the green arrow. They are flying line abreast from each other. Their wingmen are outside of the formation and flying Fighting Wing off of them. Not usable in Star Citizen for all of the reasons stated prior. So I would actually move to what I would call a diamond formation, which doesn't really exist in tactical flying, but doesn't exist in modern day tactical flying, but it is one that I created last time and said, I think this is actually probably very usable, as you can see there. And actually, I got another slide later to talk more about the mechanics of the diamond formation. Boop. All right, box is exactly what it sounds. Front element is tactical line abreast. Rear element's tactical line abreast. Everybody has an altitude stack on each other, and the 2 elements are about 1.5 mile to 2 mile trail of each other. And oh, by the way, there's one called an offset box, which is the exact same thing if you're looking over on the left there, except for the back elements just shifted half of the width of the formation over. So, and everything I say about box actually also is what I'm going to say about offset box. I'm going to do them both at once. So this is a very defensive formation. It's great for going in and dropping bombs on stuff. And that kind of thing, because it's really hard for an offensive fighter to get his nose in there without flying in front of somebody else and getting shot. Again, because line abreast is unusable, this is unusable. So again, to our diamond formation, and we'll talk to that again later. So, in fact, that later being right now. This is what I envision being a decent 4-ship formation, and it's basically it's the box formation. Just everybody rotate 45 degrees to the right or to the left, and there you go. So flight lead out in front for the whole formation. Wingman number 2 picks a side and gets in a wedge formation 200 to 500 meters. The number 3 element lead takes up the same formation as number 2, just on the opposite side, and then number 4 completes the diamond by picking up a trail formation. Actually, he's actually picking off a wedge formation off of the number 3, just again in the same direction as the previous element, so that he actually is going to end up basically flying behind number 1, but at a pretty extended range behind number 1. Now, there is a contract between number 2 and number 3 that the dead 6 o'clock area of number one. In other words, right behind, you just mentally draw a line behind number one's spacecraft, and that's a brick wall. And number three doesn't go past it in that direction. Number two doesn't go past it in the other direction. And therefore, those two will never be a flight hazard or flight risk to each other. And then, of course, number four has the best seat in the house because he can see everybody on his monitor, and he can just make sure he stays the hell out of everybody's way. All right. So those are for individual 2s and 4 ship formations. Now, what about the whole big group? When you form up a guerrilla and we're going to go do bad things to bad people, also known as a large force employment, LFE, or we call it the mother load, but that's slang, and the actual brevity code is guerrilla. That's a guerrilla. Okay, so the first one is a wall with elements spaced 3 to 5 nautical miles apart, which, again, too far forward can't see it in the computer monitor. And actually, at those distances, you're not going to see them anyway in the computer monitor. You might be able to do this if the sensor display floating there in front of you was better, but it's not. So pretty hard to do a multi-ship wall like this. You really got to turn it into a bearing. So as you see on the right, and I would just basically change nautical miles down to kilometers, and those are good distances. 3 to 5 kilometers, everybody slung 45 to 60 degrees on each other and push forward for maximum forward firepower as you go pushing into an area. Ladder, everybody's playing follow the leader, 3 to 5 nautical miles behind. With this works in Star Citizen, just make it 3 to 5 kilometers instead. Off you go to the races. You'll see that in airstrikes, a lot of times there's at least a portion that the strike package ends up looking like a ladder, particularly if everybody's going into the same exact target area and you're going to put just tons of bombs down into that factory or whatever it is to get rid of it. At some point, everybody's going to have to line up and take turns. Bearing, I already mentioned it earlier. In real life, it's 3 to 5 nautical miles apart. Now, in Star Citizen, 3 to 5 kilometers. There you go. Moving on. The Vic. Now, this is actually pretty cool. It looks really cool, particularly from the ground. This is the famous Flying V, as you saw from any World War II bomber movie, 12 o'clock high, et cetera, et cetera. So the package lead is all the way out in front, and then everybody's in a bearing formation 3 to 5 nautical miles off of him. That'll work perfectly in Star Citizen. Just make it 3 to 5 kilometers again, and off you go to the races. Just like you would in a bearing, but instead of whoever's the package lead that's way out in front, the other flights within the package sling back on either side. Eric Osimus asks, is number 4 above or below in the diamond formation or just beside? Flying around in space, having a vertical offset is irrelevant. So the answer is everybody can just line up in a plane. If you want to be above, you can be above. If you want to be below, you can be below. It won't really matter as long as you keep the distances correct. Okay. GT. Picking on Lisa. All right, and the inverse of the Vic, of course, is the Champagne, which is depicted over on the left. This is not usable. Of course, everybody goes, well, they're still at 45 to 60 degrees on each other. And I went, yes, but it's who is the reference. The blue guy is the lead. He's the reference. Everybody's supposed to be referencing him. So they would be looking 135 degrees back over their shoulder trying to find him, which you can't do on a computer monitor. Forgive me because I never made it to the previous session for questions. Why does Vic or bearing work in a guerrilla but not the equivalent versions in Squadron? The equivalent version of a bearing in a Squadron is called an echelon, and it does, as I said earlier in the previous slides. A Vic in a guerrilla, its equivalent would be a fingertip, but more spread out. Maybe fingertip if it was floated out to a root distance. And that does work. As long as you slide back to the 45 line so you can get the flight lead up into your computer monitor so you can see. Does that make sense? To delete which? I didn't say to delete them. I didn't say mandatory to delete them. I just said they don't, in Star Citizen, they really don't serve any sort of a tactical purpose. The reason why we do the close-in fingertip type formations in combat flying fighters is because you can't stop and hover like you can in a spacecraft. So when we're coming into the airbase to land, and I've got a 4-ship of airplanes, we pack everybody in tight, and we come flying up over top of the runway at 1,500 feet. 1,500 feet is a standard military pattern. We come up over top of the runway, and then the flight lead is going to put if they're coming up in fingertip, he's going to cross under either his number 2 or his number 3 and 4 to put everybody echelon on one side of the formation, the opposite side of the formation from which way they're going to break. When they come up over top of the runway, then he's going to give a signal. It's a hand signal. Basically, your pointer finger in the air and make a circle like you're doing a lasso, kind of like, woohoo, here we go. That means pitch out. We're going to pitch out. Gives a signal of the 5 fingers, the number 5. So pitch out 5. So he tells everybody 5-second spacing. Okay. And then he gives a little salute, and then he'll crank out and he'll do a 3 to 4G brake turn over top of the runway away from the rest of his formation. Number 2 is now in the lead for a couple of seconds. So number 2, once number 1 peels out to start his his brake turn from initial to what's called inside downwind, then number 2 is going to move from looking at number 1, who was 3 feet away, to looking straight down the runway and clearing for the formation now. Number 3 and 4 are still looking right at him because they're all flying 3 feet from each other. He's going to count to 5, and then he's going to wave goodbye, and then he's going to split and do a brake turn exactly the same way. And so that's going to ripple down the line as they do that. Okay, so back here, number 1, who split away from the formation now, turned 180 degrees using 3 to 4 Gs to bleed off that airspeed because you're coming up initial at 300 knots. Okay, so you come up over top, you spin 180 degrees. Now you're offset from the runway maybe 5 to 6 or 700 feet off to the left side of the runway. You're still up at 1,500 feet altitude. And you've slowed down probably. If you pulled 3 to 4 Gs, you're probably going to slow from 300. You're going to be down to close to 200 when you roll out. You're going to put the gear down. That's going to put more drag out into the airstream. That's going to slow you down. You're going to wait until, now from the F-16, every airplane has a slightly different sight picture to this. But with the F-16, you just basically look in that nice bubble canopy. You look back over your shoulder and you wait till the back end of your missile that's out on the wingtip missile rail. You put that missile and you just kind of run that missile right down the runway, visually speaking. That's what it looks like from you. And when the back of the missile gets on top of the spot you want to land, which if you're a decent pilot, I would put that as brick number 1. Boop. And that's when you perch. You hit that's a visual indication for your perch point. That's where you roll off 40, about a 45-ish to 60 degree bank turn. You push the nose down 15 to 20 degrees. So you start this descending turn 180 degrees around. Quick check of your gear, handles down, red light and the handles out, 3 green lights, landing lights on, gears down and ready, boop, come 180 degrees around, roll out, a quarter to a half mile final, about 300 to 400 feet in the air, and right on speed, so 144 plus 4 knots per 1,000 pounds of gas and ordnance hanging on the jet. So typical air-to-air sortie, you're going to be coming down final at 148, maybe 152 knots, and getting ready to round out and flare. So that took a longer time for me to talk through how you do an overhead pattern. But that 4 ship came up and would have had all 4 jets on the ground, so they're out of the way of the next 4 ship that's about half a mile behind them coming up, and the next 4 ship that's behind them, and the next 4 ship that's behind them. You can get, using that technique, you can get an entire wing of 48 airplanes at Kunsan Air Base back on the ground in under 2 minutes. All of them. That's why we fly fingertip and echelon. Pretty cool, huh? But in Star Citizen, do we have to do that? No, we don't. We don't have to land on runways. We don't have to carry 152 knots down final and round out and flare and then try to figure out how to get rid of all that energy. We can just stop in space, kick open our Moby glass and hit old, comlink and talk to Port Olisar and let that fucking asshat use bad comm and go in and land. So there you go. So like I said, it wasn't necessary. It's not that it won't work. It's just that and delete it because when are you going to do it other than showing off, which is, as a fighter pilot, I mean, showing off it's important too. Yeah, the formations for guerrilla is for an entire big strike package. Okay, so the guerrilla is war. So we're kind of building block approach. I showed you, okay, within my formation, here's 2 ships, here's 4 ships, administrative formations, and then tactical combat formations. And now when we talk about guerrillas, we're talking about, the blue arrow is a 4 ship. Each of the green arrows are 4 ships. So this is, just in this one right here, we have 20 airplanes. Yeah, there you go. That increased spacing is, because you're covering more airspace that you're trying to occupy, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Okay. Hope I didn't belabor that too much. Post hole. In space, there is no altitude. Well, that's not exactly true, but effectively, we'll say there's no altitude. In one of the rope-a-dope tricks is the famous post hole, where based on old radar technology, where things are just a blip on a screen, putting one formation underneath another formation by a couple of thousand feet. One formation is up high, one formation's down low near the ground. If they can get themselves basically one over top of the other, it's hard to tell which blip is which, and you can fool people a lot of ways. Yeah, modern day radars, that shit worked really well in like the 70s and 80s. Nowadays, computers and radars have gotten really, really good that they can spot that pretty easy. So it's not as even useful today, but a post hole in space is the same thing as a wall. It's just, just rotate your perspective. So again, same thing. I would go to a wedge if it was just within a 4 ship, or bearing for a guerrilla formation. And that should basically be it in a nutshell. So the things that I basically would just kind of go, okay, I wouldn't really practice these regularly. I wouldn't say, you kind of know what they are, but you don't need to really use them because they don't really have a tactical purpose in Star Citizen. Is the fingertip, route, close trail, echelon, and line abreast box, offset box for individual formations, and in the guerrilla, the wall, the champagne, and the post hole. I would modify these formations, fighting wing, league trail, wedge, and then for guerrilla, the bearing ladder and the Vic, to how I mentioned in there. And I would actually probably make the new go-to formation the diamond for a 4 ship, not a guerrilla, but the 4 ship. So as a pro who did this for almost 3 decades, this is kind of how I would do it as a flight lead. If administrative, I would just keep the wingmen running around and fighting wing. It's extremely fluid. It gives them lots of space. They can just kind of float around that donut hole back there, that wedge, that 3-dimensional cone back there, and they can flip switches. They can look heads down away from you because they're not right up close to you. They got some space to be able to breathe, and flip switches in the cockpit if they need to. For tactical stuff, if I'm in a 2 ship, I'm going for a wedge, and if I'm in a 4 ship, then I'm going to go for a diamond. Is the play I'm going to call as the flight lead as we approach into the fight. And if I'm commanding the entire LFE, the large force employment for the day, then bearing ladder or Vic is going to really kind of depend on what the situation is and what we're trying to do. We can talk more to that later on. That'll actually be stuff that we're going to be teaching flight leads when we start designating who's going to be a professional flight lead, which we really haven't designated that yet. We're kind of getting everybody up to speed with just flying. So the other thing is data links. Pretty much all modern 4th generation and 5th generation fighters are on some sort of a data link with each other. So they're sharing information. Combat internet, think of it like that. And that helps hugely both with tactical situational awareness and with station keeping, because you can just look down into your display and you can see where everybody else is. Well, everybody else that's on your net, which is all of your friends. So you might, real world combat flying, we've actually been able to start spreading these formations out, these guerrillas, formations out. Instead of 3 to 5 miles between 4 ships, we've been able to start spreading them out 10 miles between 4 ships and 15 miles between 4 ships, because you can still see where each other's at in the data link. We don't, Wing Commander never had that. We don't have it in Star Citizen yet. I've actually put in an issue council ticket going, hey, here's a suggestion. You guys need to maybe think about something like that. And I heard nothing back from it. But they might employ something like that in the future. It'd be kind of interesting for us to be able to link computers up. I mean, they've kind of have something a little bit like that with quantum travel, but it needs to, it would be there. A lot of this stuff we could actually employ better if you had something like that, so that you could see where each other is. All right, it's been a lot of talking. I didn't want it to go that long. You made me. It's all your fault. Okay, this is quick. This is only maybe a minute. Whoops. Here we go. There we go. All right. I'm going to put it on mute because I'm going to talk to it, because otherwise it's just a whole lot of Proteus and Chandran not using any sort of comm discipline at all, because they hadn't been taught it yet. We hadn't even talked about it yet. So anyway, so here we go. Oop. All right, so this is something more of an echelon at sort of a route distance. So you're going to be holding around 50 to 60 meters from each other. Proteus is actually slung a little bit aft, but he's moving up because I'm coaching him from the wing. This is looking from my cockpit. We're all flying Hornets just so we have 3 spacecraft that are similar in performance. And we are not using match velocity, by the way. We are doing this by hand. They wanted to use match velocity, and I said, nope. You got to do it the hard way first before you get to use the crutch. So you get used to actually walking the throttle back and forth and trying to hold station, as you see over here on the left side as we're coming up. And we're just doing some formation bullshit over top of Olisar to show off. Really, it's just for practice for them to kind of introduce them to the ideas. And they did great. They picked it up like ducks in water and all that good stuff. And now it's a little bit weird when we start turning horizontally in the plane. That's a little bit something that real fighter jets don't actually do, because we're flying aerodynamically instead of with thrusters. So like I said, real aircraft actually you roll and use your lift vector to turn, whereas we can just turn and yaw. So that was a new perspective for me. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, we can just turn and yaw, and what's that look like? Because you usually will roll. And that's probably enough there. Okay, any questions? Any more questions? Feel free to come up in Discord. How do I get rid of it? I want it to go away. I don't want it to be here anymore. Close. There we go. Yeah, how can I help you? Are you talking about close formations, or are you talking about combat formation? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Combat formation. Absolutely. Trails. Yeah. Yeah. That's good for the flight lead. Not so good for the wingman, because there's nobody clearing his 6. So. Yeah. Well, if you're in echelon, you're in close, which is not a tactical formation. If you're going to be more in a bearing, which was, like I said, the same line as echelon, but you're going to be spaced out more like 500 meters, which is much more fluid. And you're not at 500 meters. You're not worried about hitting your flight lead anymore. I mean, you've got plenty of space, so you can actually keep them in the, look at them over there, and now check your sensors. Look at them over there. Look at, clear to the right. Look at them over there. Clear here 6 o'clock. Look at them over here. Turn around. Clear your own 6 o'clock. Look at them over there. Does that make sense? Stick. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Yeah, I know he's got folks. Ah. Okay. The 200 to one, the 20 to 100 meters was only for is only for fighting wing, and even though it's called fighting wing, it's not a combat formation. Fighting wing is really more of an admin formation. I kind of use fighting wing where I would use root. Hey man, kick back to fighting wing, ops check. Leads 3,000 pounds of gas left. Whatever it is. Yeah, but you guys are going the same. You're going the same direction. So you shouldn't have thousands of meters per second closing velocities between the two of you. You should have pretty much zero or close. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah, you start getting... Now, there's another thing that makes a lot of this only moderately useful, and actually, not only does the fact that we're flying through a very small window called a computer screen looking into the Star Citizen universe make most of this stuff not work. There's another thing about it is how tight, how unrealistically tight spacecraft can turn in Star Citizen. These things are helicopters on acid. They can just spin around in these tiny little itty bitty turn circles that forget doing actual BFM within. Some of the tightest turning fourth generation fighters at their best is about a 2,200, 2,300, maybe 2,400 foot turn circle. And their degrees per second is somewhere in the low 20s, 9 Gs, 9.5 Gs, 400 knot, 9.5 G freaking turn in a F-15 or an F-16, you're going to see 22, 23 degrees per second nose rate. You go down into the ship list here and you see 105 degrees per second pitch roll or yaw rate, so it's just these ridiculously large numbers, which creates these ridiculously tiny turn circles that have absolutely no basis in any sort of reality. And therefore these distances, the distances that real world formations are based on is basically based on one turn circle and the min range of your tightest weapon. So line abreast is 6,000 to 9,000 foot apart. Why is it 6,000 to 9,000 foot apart? So that if me as the wingman and I look over and I see, oh my God, there's the MiG that just showed up behind, just just appeared out of nowhere magically, right behind flight lead 1 mile back. I basically have enough room to turn, snap 9 Gs onto the jet, get a full, 95, 100 degrees of turn and get an AIM-9 off at that guy and blow him up before he blows number one up. You hope. So that's what those distances are based on. And then similarly out into the guerrilla, those 3 to 5 miles are based on how far apart can we get these formations to cover more ground and kind of be present in more airspace, but still be close enough to each other that if one gets in trouble, the other can turn and be turn and be a factor to that engagement in literally 3 to 5 miles. The other 4-ship over there can basically turn 90 degrees and you're already have weapons range over onto your buddies over there. So that if there's somebody in there stirring them up and they're getting killed, you can at least get shots into them. So that's what modern day formations or combat formations are based on. Project that forward into Star Citizen. Now you see the problem with these spacecraft that can turn on a freaking dime. And oh, by the way, if you calculate the numbers out, those things are not 9 Gs. Those things are pulling like 90 or 900 Gs. I mean, they would just kill you. You would just the spacecraft would just turn you into thick and chunky salsa the first time you stuff the stick all the way to one side. Excuse me. So one of my problems with the flight model and with Star Citizen in general is their own lack of sticking to their own logic. For us to have these spacecraft that can go from 0 to 2/10 the speed of light in a 10-second ramp up would create so many G's inside of it that not only would the person turn into chunky salsa in the seat, the ship itself would tear itself apart because there's no materials that can take that type of stress. So there would have to be some sort of hand-wavium fantasy logic similar to Star Trek, where you go, hey, there's inertial dampening fields. Hey, if we can create artificial gravity with an artificial gravity plate thing, then you would be able to create artificial gravity bubbles and stuff like that that would be able to counteract those G's and counteract that stress inside the ship. Okay, great. I'm good with that. That's actually, I understand this is a video game and it's supposed to be fun and it's a story. So, okay, I accept that hand wavium. That is now the logic, though. That is now the logic. You've set the precedent. You've set the logic. Okay, now as writers in Star Citizen, you had better fucking stick to your same logic. And they don't. Okay, so now I start pulling hard turns and all of a sudden I get gray out and I get red out. And I'm like, what? Like, oh yeah, it's so much more realistic. And my answer is bullshit. No, it's not. It's immersion breaking, because if we have these ships that can accelerate like that and can turn like that, you obviously have some sort of an inertial dampening field, like, to borrow that from Star Trek, thing that is going to be handling all of those stresses and G's to keep you from dying. If it can handle 900 G's, how can it not handle the last 9? How can it, if it can handle 900 G's, but it suddenly can't handle 909 G's? It can't handle that last 1%? I don't believe you. So that's my bitch about, and that's one of the reasons why I say 3.5, man, new flight model in 3.5, it better change a lot. Because otherwise Foghorn's going to be pretty pissed. Because if ComStab basically doesn't completely change, if ComStab continues to retro thrust whenever I turn and slow me down when I did not command it, then I'm basically done. I'm just going to throw my hands up and go, you're not fucking listening to the audience. If these constant gray out and red out doesn't go away, I'm just like, dude, I can't play this. Everything you do breaks the immersion for me and just ruins the experience. So you guys don't have to agree with me. That's my thoughts on those. Sorry, I'm holding you guys hostage. I know. I apologize, but that's my logic with it. So, any other questions? Now that you guys won't dare to ever ask me a question again. All right. Anything else? Going once? Going twice? Going thrice? All right, you guys, obviously I briefed you into submission. So we'll wrap this thing up. And I will say thank you to everybody for listening. Wrapping up this installment of Academics of Foghorn. I hope you found it interesting and helpful. If you have any questions I didn't answer, please feel free to contact me via email, Discord, Spectrum, or of course the comments section below if you're watching this later on, and I will answer to the best of my ability as quickly as I can. If you are part of the Aurora Public membership and haven't hit the follows and the subscribes and all of those cool buttons like you should and support your own folks, then please hit that immediately. Enable notifications so you can remain up to date whenever we're posting new stuff. And if you're a visitor, please feel free to do all those same actions as well. We do actually take a look at any comments and all that kind of thing to help us improve our content. If you'd like to find out more, you can see there on the screen. You can come visit us at aurorarepublic.space, which is got to be one of the most awesome domains ever. And of course, you can find us on Spectrum at robertspaceindustriescom/org/aurora-rep. And if you're watching us on Twitch and YouTube, then you already know how to find us on Twitch and YouTube. So I'll see you next time. Thank you very much for listening to me rant and talk about formations. I will sign off, and I'd like to wish you a pleasant remainder of your morning, afternoon, and or evening. Thank you very much for watching.